Thank you. Oh, so I think you all know, but thebeatnews.org is our website. And at Beat, we work together to protect the environment for wildlife in support of the natural world that sustains us all. We think of ourselves as having three focal areas: stewardship, education and outreach, and watchdogging, all on a sound foundation of science. On our website, you can always find our community calendar, our jobs board, and public notices, as well as the environmental monitor for the Berkshires and Pioneer Valley. And those are the really big projects that have to go through state review. So important ones to keep an eye on. Also, there's a donate button. If you haven't donated already, you can do so right on the website. And tonight, we've got all our staff here to talk about sort of what we've done for the last year and what we have coming up for next year. So we'll hear from Rose Wessel, Jake Loeffner, Noah Henkenius, and Chelsea Simmons, and me. So I will hand it off to Rose.
Hi, Jane. Thanks. We have some updates on our watchdogging, which is mostly the No Frat Grass and Mass program. Next slide, please.
Oops. It's not working. Hold on. There we go.
There we go. Most of you are really familiar with us, but just in case, No Frat Gas and Mass is a program of BEAT. We started up in 2014 in response to the large Kinder Morgan pipeline and 4 other transmission projects, gas transmission projects that were proposed at that time. Since then, they've broken up into smaller projects, but we continue to our mission to oppose new fossil fuel infrastructure and other fuel-based infrastructure. I've started using that term because it also has come to mean things like trash burning and biomass, which are just as polluting as fossil fuels. And we also promote energy efficiency and sustainable renewable energy sources, and support local permanent jobs in a green energy economy. So we dive in a lot into legislation and regulations to try and make sure that all happens. And one thing we've started doing recently is working on transitioning existing emitting infrastructure to zero emissions alternatives. You can find any information you need on nofratgasandmass.com. So fighting new fossil fuel infrastructure, it's coming up on 8 years now that we've been in this fight. And it's now moved to smaller utility pipeline expansions. So instead of interstate pipelines and dealing with FERC, it's intrastate. And we're dealing with regulatory agencies and the utilities. Most of the ones that are being proposed right now are Eversource expansions. They refer to them as reliability projects, but they really also include the capacity for expansion and any upgrades that are being done to these systems. Sure, they might fix leaks, but they also commit us to decades more of fossil fuel use. So we would rather see the efforts go to clean energy rather than expanding existing utilities. We continue to advise the communities that are affected in these fights. And both ISO New England and the gas industry analysts have now conceded a few times that they won't ever be able to get a large transmission line through New England and Massachusetts, usually citing the fact that it was just massive opposition. They know they can't come here anymore. So that everyone who participated in this, some of you in this call were very involved in that fight too. Thank you so much. We've made headway that way. So one of the things we've been working on for a little while now is put peakers in the past. This is peaker electric generation plants. They're the ones who fire up when there's peak demand on the grid. Usually during heat waves is when they come on, occasionally during severe cold snaps, but that's happening less and less. We started out by approaching these companies and asking them, do you have a plan for decarbonization? Because that's now state law. And we found that they didn't have any plans in place. But we gathered 300 signatures on a petition saying we want you to convert to clean energy and storage. We built a coalition of 26 organizations and businesses in the Berkshires, and we have great support from our local legislators and local officials. And one of the owners of 3 peaker plants, 2 in the Berkshires, 1 in West Springfield, said, you know what, you're right, we want to work with you. We're going to transition to grid scale battery storage, and they're now on target to be completely converted by December of 2023. And it'll be charged by solar that they plan to put on site in West Springfield. So it's an already disturbed site where the solar is coming from, which is great, and all transferring over to grid scale battery storage. We're also in talks with Pittsfield Generating. That's the big one on Merrill Road. They hadn't thought much about transitioning, and initially when we were talking to them, didn't sound that committed, but now they're starting to look into it. They're talking to analysts. They're talking about possibly trying some small storage on the site. We're still pushing for them to take the plunge and go ahead, follow suit with Cogentrix, the owner of the other 3, and just take the plunge and go with battery storage and renewables. Those are ongoing talks. In the meantime, we also had an air quality permit review for that one with the DEP, and we found that there are lots of regulatory shortcomings. They were forced by a lawsuit from Conservation Law Foundation to set emissions limits, declining emissions limits, but the regulations to enforce those were never put in place. So we're starting to engage on that front as well, trying to make sure that DEP actually follows our new strong climate laws. And we're building a statewide campaign for 2022. There are 23 other peakers across the state. And that's aside from the new one that they want to build in Peabody. We also work with MCAN, Massachusetts Climate Action Network, who's in the fight for the new Peabody peaker plant that they want to build out there, another gas-powered plant. Next slide. Thanks. The other main fight that we have going on is Community Eco Power. This is the trash burning plant over by Price Chopper on Hubbard Avenue. If you've been there lately and you felt your eyes burn or your nose burn or your throat burn or just smelled an obnoxious burning chemical smell, that's where it's coming from. It used to have occasional smell like a pile of trash, but now it really smells like burning chemicals. And part of the reason is there are major infrastructure failures going on there. Emissions are now coming up through the roof and out of the bay doors. And it's not the usual stuff from the exhaust stacks. Those have scrubbers on them. The stuff that's coming out is pure burning chemicals. We've started working with DEP and the city to make sure that everyone's aware and everyone's taking action. It's really slow. Anything that's happening, the enforcements aren't really holding very well from DEP. So we've now launched a reporting system that lets people notify Mass DEP, the EPA, and City of Pittsfield officials all at once. All you have to do is fill in one report. It automatically goes to all 3 agencies. And it's to let them know how urgent it is, that it's not just the pesky environmental group that's complaining. That, we went out canvassing for the DEP Pittsfield generating thing and heard from lots of people out in the neighborhoods. Is that where that smell comes from? It's like, no, that's another issue. So now there's a central place where you can go. Anytime you smell that burning chemical smell, please go to tinyurl.com/Pittsfield smell report and fill that out. The more documentation we have of how pervasive this problem is, the more we have means to push against this and get change to happen. It's a bad one. So next slide. So now I'll turn it over to Jake, who also works on No Frack Gas in Mass. Thanks.
Thanks, Rose. I'm going to talk a little bit about the No Frack Gas in Mass website and how to really take advantage of some of the things that we put in it. My job supporting Rose is basically going out there every day and looking for news items and reports that have to do with all things related to the climate, to the clean energy transition, and to the various pipeline and infrastructure battles that Rose described that we're involved with. But I take a higher level view of it. I look at all the local stuff, but I also look at what's happening regionally, nationally, and all over the world. I pile all that stuff into the website, and it became apparent after doing that for about a year that that was all well and good, but that we weren't really taking care of the rest of you folks who are on the call, who might benefit from knowing about this stuff. And we assume if you're following BEAT and if you're involved like we are in this, you're very aware of what's happening with the climate and its relationship to the environment and that sort of thing. So we wanted to put together something that was something that came and spoke directly to you, basically, and gave you news you could use, things that you were really interested in a bite-sized package that was not only informative at sort of quick and easy, accessible level, but also would direct you, if you were interested in following up on more, into the much deeper information that we have embedded in the website that might be hard to find otherwise. Next slide, please. So what we do is we look for information about what's going on in terms of pipelines and liquefied natural gas and protests and all the other kinds of things that are happening in the world that we're trying to go against, basically, to try to turn things around. And we look specifically for information that will inform the big picture. What's going on, what are the fossil fuel industries players doing to kind of muddy the waters and sow confusion, and how do you kind of make your way through that and clarify it all. One thing we've noticed lately is they're changing their tactics a little bit. They used to be outright climate change denial. Nobody's doing that anymore because it doesn't pass the laugh test. It's really hard to kind of pass that along in any cocktail setting, and say you don't believe it. So what they've done so far is change their tactics, and now what they're doing is they're going after the solution. They're saying they're casting doubt on whether renewable energy is actually reliable enough, whether it'll make the grid unstable, whether it'll cost us all way too much money, things like that. And of course, all of those things can be batted down by fact-based reporting, and that's what we're going after. We're also going after some of the false solutions that the fossil fuel industry is promoting, like hydrogen and carbon capture and sequestration. Even biomass is one of the false solutions they're doing. Liquefied natural gas as a clean energy solution, those types of things. So we're putting all of that in perspective. Next slide, please. And we're also lightening it up a little bit with some hopeful news. I try to put a lot of that in there when it's available. We're finding all kinds of information about the just rapidly accelerating areas of long duration energy storage, for instance, new programs and incentives to improve building energy efficiency, clean transportation, clean energy, both offshore wind and solar farms and things like that. And as Rose was mentioning, the burgeoning new interest in converting peaker plants over to this hybrid model of solar plus battery storage is getting to be very popular. In fact, on a practical way, when we were talking to Cogentrix on the 3 power plants that they're interested in converting over to clean energy, they wanted to know from us if we had any solutions or any ideas about what to use for clean energy. And we were able to very quickly go into our archives that we have put together so far and give them a number of ideas of various forms of long duration and short duration energy storage, depending on what they want. the different technologies that are available and the contact companies who are developing these things. And so we've become sort of the reference librarian that can provide really useful information. And they have been terrific in terms of being, a good player in this. And I really think they're going to follow through with that. So, so anyway, this is all then what I do is I gather all this information during the week, and then on Fridays, I kind of pull it together by writing an introduction that is directly targeted to the readers to say, okay, here's what's going on. Here's how it all relates to everybody, how it relates to the various stories that are coming up, because a lot of times they are connected. And we also put in links from there. So if there's something in the introduction that you say, oh, that sounds interesting, you can link directly to the excerpt of the story that I've put in there in the newsletter. If you want to read the rest of it, you can link directly from there to the original publication, read that. And if you want to find more about that topic from the newsletter, you can go directly into the website and that'll take you to the archive on that subject, and you can go as deep as you want. We have years worth now of related articles and reports and things like that. So so go for it, basically. And that comes out just about every week. I try to put that out around 5 o'clock on Fridays. Next slide, please. So if you're interested in taking a look at that, this is the best way to find it. It's easy. Go to the nofracgasandmass.com website. On the homepage, just scroll down and look for this graphic. If you click on that, it'll take you right into the archive, and you can start reading from there. If you want a smaller bite, you can just take a look at the last newsletter that I shipped on last Friday, and I am dropping that link into the chat right now. So if you just go there, you will get on the last one. And if you feel like, keeping up with that, trying it out for a while, just put your email in where it asks for it, and you will get it in your inbox every time I publish. So that's it from me. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you find it useful. And I'm going to turn it over now to Noah, who will talk about some of the exciting stewardship projects that he's been working on.
All right. Thank you, Jake. Hello, everyone. My name is Noah Henkenius. I am the stewardship coordinator. And while the stewardship department has been involved in all kinds of different projects this year, from organizing river cleanups, tackling invasive species, doing temperature monitoring in cold water streams, tonight, what I'm going to be speaking about specifically is some work that we did that was funded by a grant from the Berkshire Environmental Endowment. So next slide, please. So to get into this, what were we doing? So the grant was funding work to do some E. coli sampling throughout Berkshire County. So first, I don't know how familiar people are with what E. coli is, but basically E. coli is a bacteria that is normally found in the gut of warm-blooded animals. And so what we do is, in this case, BEAT specifically is very interested in sampling stormwater pipes for E. coli. We do this by, we have these small little plastic containers that are 125 milliliters, and we fill them up. Then we take the sample to the lab, and basically it reads as a result of the most probable number of E. coli colonies. And if that number is particularly high, what that can be an indicator of often is that there might be some kind of illicit sewage connection, or maybe just some kind of pipe fracture that's slowly leaking sewage into the stormwater system. So with that, next slide. This year, what I focused on, I should mention, this is ongoing work that we've been doing for several years now. So this year, what we've been focusing on is really testing pipes that have historically tested high within the city of Pittsfield to see if those issues have been remediated or if they're still ongoing. And then in addition to that, what we like to try and do is to survey a section of a stream or a river for additional stormwater pipes. So this year we were able to survey about half a mile of the Yukon Brook in Lenox for stormwater pipes, resulting in 6 new outfalls that we found. And we've been working on updating our MS4 GIS database, which is basically just fancy terminology for a database we have that contains a map with all of our stormwater pipes. If you want an example of that, you can look to the right here on this map that I've included in the slide. It shows you an example of what it looks like on our perspective. But we now have over 1,000 pipes mapped within that system that we have found. And then again, really focusing this year, I'm very proud to say that we've been able to take on a couple of work study students to help out a little bit with some of this work. And it's just been great to be able to get some assistance that was paid for instead of requesting unpaid volunteer help. So with that, next slide, please. So there are some challenges that we faced this year with this process. And what you'll see here is I've included a couple of graphs that show discharge upon a particular section of the Housatonic River. And what I am trying to emphasize here is, especially if you look at the actual scale of each graph, it's different. The top graph shows from about June 1st to the end of September in 2020. Same thing with the bottom graph. But what you can see is the river essentially had a lot more water flowing through it this year because of all the rain that we experienced. So that created a lot of challenges for us. One challenge being that our protocol, which was developed in coordination with Mass DEP, calls for at least 72 hours of no rain in order to do our sampling. That made it so we only had so many days when we could actually do sampling this year. In addition to that, because it rained so heavily this year, even on days when we technically could sample, oftentimes it created a safety obstacle for us just because we didn't feel safe putting people out there in the river and asking them to collect samples from these stormwater pipes just because they're flowing so high that even when I was sampling one day, I got kicked down by it and I knew it wasn't safe. So as I mentioned, we hired some paid work study students to help us with that. Part of the reason we did that is just so we weren't asking unpaid volunteers to potentially put themselves in these hazardous situations. And with those work study students, we were able to provide just a little bit additional training and oversight that helped us out on our end to make sure that everything was happening safely. With that, next slide, please. All right, so what were the results of all of our efforts that we did this year? Basically what it comes down to, again, I kind of mentioned this, we were able to sample on somewhat of a limited basis this year, but we did what we could. And we found that some of the pipes that have tested historically high within the area are still testing high, particularly along the west branch of the Housatonic River. With that, next slide, please. And so going off of that, what are some of the positive outcomes that have resulted from this? Well, fortunately, now we have been contracted by the city of Pittsfield to do a much more rigorous testing of all the stormwater outfalls, which again, the map on the right here shows all the stormwater outfalls within the city of Pittsfield that we now have to test. And this is great because that's all being regulated under their NIPD's MS4 permit, which again is basically just some kind of fancy terminology to say that they have to keep pollutants such as nitrogen, E. coli, and others under certain levels. So we've been working with the city to make sure that all the pipes will be able to get within acceptable levels. And then again, I mentioned this earlier, but we're so proud to have been able to take on some paid work study students this year and immerse them in our stewardship work. So with that is all that I have, and I will pass it on to Chelsea.
Thanks, Noah. Hi, everyone. I'm Beats' new Education and Outreach Coordinator. My role here is to extend our reach throughout the Berkshires and beyond with our weekly newsletter, action alerts, and educational presentations. We sponsor these monthly gatherings and attend dozens of events, conferences, and meetings year-long. So I've really only been in this position for about a month. Initially, I was hired in October as a water quality associate to occasionally help NOAA with outfall surveying and water quality testing. I've still been helping NOAA with that when the water has actually allowed us to do so. But anyhow, since I've only been part of the team for a short time, I don't really think I have too many updates. I've mostly just been learning the ropes of this new position. Thanks, Jane. So a lot of my work in this role involves keeping the public informed and engaged by making our weekly newsletters and planning educational presentations, like I said before. And this past month, I've been figuring out the fairly routine responsibilities and tasks that an education and outreach coordinator needs to do, like updating the website, reaching out to future presenters, and so on, as well as gathering info for our weekly newsletter and distributing that every Wednesday. Also, just a side note here, if you are subscribed to our newsletter, you perhaps haven't received it lately. Sorry if that is the case. We've been having issues with our email marketing platform, but we recently switched over to a new one, so hopefully that won't be a problem anymore. And if you're not subscribed to our weekly newsletter, I encourage you to give it a try, as a lot of cool and informative articles from the week, as well as helpful info like the local public notices, job openings, and community events. Recently, I've been organizing the space in our newly owned building, which has been great. Not only is it just satisfying to do, but it's also given me the opportunity to think about how we can best utilize our space, as well as ways we can make it more inviting and engaging to the public. Another thing that I've been focusing on is thinking about what education displays we can install and what those should entail. So right now we are working on putting together an immersive wildlife observation station that is focused on birds and has an emphasis on experiential learning. And we are actually looking for bird feeders, field guides, and binoculars. If anyone has any of those that they would like to donate to me, we would greatly appreciate it. Next slide, please. So looking ahead to 2022, next month I will be starting the Tree of the Month again, which will likely be distributed as small flyers and also accessed through our weekly newsletter. For anyone who might not know, Tree of the Month was something that BEAT did for a while in collaboration with the city of Pittsfield, Pittsfield Tree Watch, and Massachusetts DCR's Greening the Gateway Cities program. And on this slide, you can see one of the past trees of the month from that collaboration. However, this new startup of Tree of the Month will be something that BEAT does just for the purpose of educating people on how to identify different tree species, as well as all the ways in which trees are awesome and unique. So be on the lookout for that and upcoming info on how you can access it. Another thing that BEAT is planning for this upcoming year is expanding our pollinator garden. I fortunately get to be part of planning that, and hopefully I'll even be able to get outside and get my hands dirty when it comes to time to actually start planting and prepping the beds. Lastly, we are looking to do a 2-week program packed with events that would start on May 21st, which is World Fish Migration Day, and end on June 5th, World Environment Day. A couple of events we hope to do during those 2 weeks are an event at Churchill Brook on World Fish Migration Day to celebrate that brook trout, and other fish can move up and down the brook from headwaters in Pittsfield to the outlet at Onoda Lake. This is actually possible because BEAT and our partners, the Housatonic Valley Association and the city of Pittsfield, removed 2 undersized culverts and replaced them with bridges. So not only can fish and other aquatic life move up and downstream, but so can terrestrial wildlife. Also, the water from big storms goes under the roads, not over, which is a plus for everyone. We also want to hold an open house or multiple at our new environmental center on the weekends during this 2-week program. So be on the lookout for more details on that as well as we get closer to spring. And I think that's all I really have for tonight. So I will hand it over to Jane.
Cool. Thank you, Chelsea. Well, thank you all. You guys are absolutely wonderful, and I am so proud to work with all of you. You do great work, and you're the reason BEAT is so effective. My update is mainly about our new home. So for about 2.5 years, BEAT was looking for a new home and finally found this perfect move-in location on the southwest branch of the Housatonic River. And I do want to take a moment here to acknowledge that this land is the ancestral home of the Mohican people who were forced from the land and are now residing in Wisconsin, and now known as the Stockbridge-Munsee. We're really glad so much more of their history is being presented in the Berkshires. There's an archaeological dig down in Stockbridge, and there have been displays circulating in the Berkshires. We will try to be good stewards of this land going forward. The building that we're in, that's shown here, was built in 3 stages. The part that comes closest to the road, the chapel, was built starting in 1868. Then in 1913, the Emmanuel Community Church purchased the property and added on this whole second part of the building in 1913. And in 1958, it was moved on to its current foundation and basement. And then in November of 2019, BEAT moved in. And we were renting the building from 2019 forward. Let's see, we moved in on Black Friday with the help of 14 volunteers and 5 staff, and then COVID hit. So all of us were working from home, but we have a board member who's a professional house painter who managed to paint our main meeting room and 2 offices and do repairs and get everything looking gorgeous for us, all for free. We also had Mass Save come in and do LED lighting throughout the entire building. Again, all for free. And then the Center for Ecotechnology got us a grant because when we went to insulate and weatherize the building, they found knob and tube wiring up in the ceiling. So with the grant from CET, that was all removed. And with another Mass Save program, the newer part, the 1913 part of the building, was insulated and weatherized. Unfortunately, the chapel from 1868 really couldn't be insulated. So all that has been done. And meanwhile, we were raising money, and on Earth Day of 2021, we actually executed our purchase and sale agreement. Unfortunately, things got a little slow after that, and we didn't actually close on the building until November 8th, but we now own the Environmental Leadership and Education Center. Being right on the river is fantastic. It allows us to do environmental water quality testing and macroinvertebrate testing of the little critters in the river. We're going to be transitioning to all native flora throughout here. The river bank right now is almost all invasive species, so it's going to be a real challenge. But we've already installed a pollinator garden, and we said stormwater swale here, but it's really more of a rain garden. And I'm really proud to say that the rain garden held all the water from every storm except one that overflowed a bit. But it's been tremendously successful at capturing the rain and letting it sink in. But also we had tons of monarch butterflies and other pollinator species that actually emerged from the garden. And we're planning on adding lots more pollinator gardens and transitioning to mostly native plants, although our paths may remain thyme and microclover, so they won't need to be mowed, but will still provide good nectar sources for pollinators. And all our gardens are made possible by funding from Karen and Jeffrey Ross. So we thank them very much. Oh, and I should mention our current garden, the plants were all donated by the Xerces Society for Invertebrate Preservation. So moving inside the building, these are our plans for the future. We've got a great architect and green designer working to help us figure out how to make the building fully accessible and a net zero building. So the spaces shown here in red or magenta are to make the building fully accessible. So you would come in through a sloped walkway up to our door and then have a small foyer that would prevent the air from getting immediately into the building. So you'd have a two-door system. We'll be adding a storm window on our old windows that are up here and a new tilt and slide window to make the wildlife viewing station more accessible. We'll be adding an accessible bathroom and an accessible balcony so that you can look out over the river as well. And then we'll have a lift to bring people downstairs. I'm really excited about this lift. In the upstairs part, it's only comes up halfway so that you still have the windows and it's light and airy. And then, so the upstairs is to the left on this picture, the downstairs is on the right, and it would be fully enclosed downstairs. And then downstairs, you can see the magenta again is where the lift comes down. We'll have an enclosed storage space. So Chelsea has done an awesome job of making things much, much neater, but this will make it even better. And one of the first tasks down here, we have 4 windows that are, you can't see out them at the moment, but those will be really sealed up so that the mice can't get in either. We're also planning on dividing our current kitchen in half. So we'll have a much smaller kitchen, but we'll also have a lab space on the other end where we can continue to do our water quality testing. And our vision is to make the building net zero energy. So it'll be insulated and weatherized much more than it is now. And we'll have a large photovoltaic array on the south-facing roof with battery storage so that in the event of a blackout, people could come here to get warm or cool or charge their phones or their laptops or in an emergency, even their car. To do this, we're going to have to replace the roof and reinforce the roof to be able to hold the photovoltaics as well as the increased snow load if there's no warmth coming up through the building. So all in all, BEAT is an effective organization with an 18-year history of accomplishing meaningful environmental benefits, partnering with dozens of environmental and community organizations, engaging and educating the public from young kids to seniors, and employing and developing highly effective environmental leaders, all on a limited budget. And I want to thank you all here tonight for making all of this possible. And of course, if you haven't donated yet, please do. Thank you so much. And does anybody have any questions? Or comments? You can go ahead and unmute yourselves.
I see a question in the chat. How long does it last? I think that was about the photovoltaic panels. They generally last, it depends on which kind we get. They generally last, they're rated for 20 years. They last much longer. And I was talking with somebody from, I think it was Northeast Solar, about what happens to solar panels after they're traded out for new ones. And there's a huge secondary market. So even if we had to trade after a few decades, it ends up going to a secondary market for people who don't need as high efficiency panels as the newer ones. So they last for decades.
And the ones we're looking at are, well, specifically through Berkshire Photovoltaic Systems, are made in the US and made avoiding most toxic materials and highly recyclable as well. But I believe Chris has people who have had panels on their house for well over 40 years. So. And and our architect is here tonight, Wendy Brown. Wendy has been absolutely awesome and finding, well, first of all, helping make decisions, coming up with the idea of the balcony, which she proposed almost sheepishly, say, well, you could consider doing this. And I was just so excited. I think that's just such an awesome idea, and found us that wonderful lift, which I'm excited about that too. So.
I'm really excited for you, Jane. It's been, it's just really exciting to see this happen. And I know I looked at, at least one other building with you a few years ago. And so you finally found one right in the river that is really just a cute little building and a great size for you. So very exciting.
Yeah, I think we may have dragged you to 2 different buildings before this, one of which was much smaller and really couldn't house us at all, and the other of which, oh boy, would have needed a whole lot of work to move into.
And no matter what, it's all much bigger than the upstairs bedroom in your house.
And I am so glad to have a house back and a dining room and a guest room. It's wonderful.
There is, it looks like another question in the chat. It says, how are they cleaned? I believe this is again referring to the photovoltaics.
And that's a good question. I am not sure. But I think one of the things we may do is try and set up a contract with Chris Kilfoyle or Berkshire Photovoltaic Systems. I shouldn't refer to it as just Chris, to make sure that we have something in place for not only cleaning, but also sort of doing an annual checkup to make sure that everything is still functioning the way it should.
The other thing is, if you don't have a lot of nearby trees that dump junk on them, and you're in an area that gets a fair amount of rainfall, which we know it will attest, we certainly do, especially lately, they're kind of self-cleaning, and because they're slippery, and if they're at a decent pitch, they wash off really well. Now, you can periodically have them squeegeed or something like that to get that last couple of percentage of efficiency to get the dust off of it, that sort of thing. But they're, for the most part, pretty self-cleaning.
Yeah, we've had a panel, well, I guess we've had a bunch of different panels at my house, some of which are pretty tiny, but our big panel, we never even thought about cleaning, actually.
Yeah, I have an 18 panel array and we've never had to clean them off. There's enough rainfall that even the dust gets washed off. And the power rating, I haven't seen it change. So it looks like there's nothing blocking it.
Yeah. People who have panels like in the desert Southwest or something like that, where there can be an accumulation of dust and it doesn't rain, they have a cleaning issue. But
yeah, I've seen some automated systems that it's almost like a car wash brush that goes down and then it resets itself and waits till the next cleaning. But that's usually for really high power arrays to, grid scale arrays that need to function at absolute 100% efficiency and out in the desert more often than not. For the
And
dust
definitely, one of the things we will do is have a readout in Beat that looks at the output and our energy use as well, so that we can make this an educational display and keep an eye on everything that's going on.
I think that's a good point to make, Jane, is that you alluded it to a little bit, but and this will be better once we're through this part of COVID. But the idea is to make our new home and be a real community resource, to have people coming and going pretty regularly, to take advantage of some of the things like the nature interactive stuff that Chelsea has been developing, and we'll use it for places for community meetings and all kinds of stuff like that, that just we have that ability now. Pandemic aside, we can deal with that. But that is something that we're really looking forward to doing in the future, and inviting all of you in at a much more, active rate than we could when we were at the second floor of Jane's house. We had to be a little careful about who we invited over.
Indeed. And this will be fully accessible. There is a ramp now, but there is not an upstairs bathroom. And the bathrooms downstairs have stairs into the bathroom. So it's not an ideal situation at the moment.
If anyone's interested, I'm not a co-host, but I have the setup where I can show people what a solar system reading looks like. I'm now co-host. There we go. So if you stop sharing screen, I can share screen. Let's see, share. And it varies from company to company. I happen to be with Sunbug, who uses Solar Edge. But you can see what you produce over a whole year. Get readings, and of course it goes down in the winter. February, we had a lot of snow, and it was really sticky stuff, so we didn't produce much. That's when a cleaning system would have been handy. We also could have hired somebody who dares to go up on our roof. I don't go up ladders very easily, but it still produced energy in the meantime. You can also see what it's doing for any given week. So you can see each day when it produces, and then overnight when it doesn't. Another neat thing that you can check is let me see, reports. Hopefully this is all still here. The layouts, that's my 18 panels and how much each one of them put out today. And you can watch it drop in real time as the sun goes down or rises, the sun is coming up, so you can tell which ones are getting hit. This is another way to tell if there's anything in the way on your panels, or if one of them's not functioning correctly anymore. And there's also reports. Let me see if I can get to the reports. Oh, it's not doing it anymore. It used to tell you weather information, and I don't see that anymore. But you can see a comparative. This is for all the years that I've had it. So this year, I produced more in the summer than I have other summers, and actually more this fall than I have most other falls. So it's really handy to have all that kind of information. And that's something that we can make available at Beat as an ongoing interactive display if we wanted to, if we have a spare computer to do that. Let's see, there's automatic energy reporting. Yeah, they don't have the weather anymore. You used to be able to tell what the wind speeds were and all that stuff. But you can see how much was produced today, how much this month, and how much for the entire life of this panel since this array since 2017. So that kind of reading is really fun.
And then we hope to have the same sort of thing for the river, with what the flow is and whatever parameters that we can continuously monitor. So we'll have a few different dedicated displays of all these various things. Was that another question? Lithium is a less of an issue with the solar panels than with the batteries. And the current plan for batteries, I believe, is what are they called? Sealed lead acid batteries. We also want to look into Form Energy's battery, which is not ready for prime time yet, but we aren't ready to install the batteries yet either. And Form Energy does an iron air flow battery, which is a multi-day storage battery and does not have, as far as I know, has no lithium or cobalt in it.
It's also very long-term storage, so it can last days, I believe, right?
Yeah, they build themselves specifically as multi-day. They were formed to develop a multi-day battery, and they do have batteries being installed in, I think it's Michigan.
Minnesota.
Minnesota, state that begins with M. And they're a battery company from Massachusetts. So it would be really great. I have not contacted them yet, but we aren't to that stage yet. But I agree, lithium is a problem, and trying to find, there are more environmentally responsible lithium versus less, but have not dug into that yet. Did I really answer your question, Pamela?
Pamela, you're muted.
It is. Actually, all of this information is very helpful, and the reason I'm asking is that since you're so central to the community and you're being looked at, to be forward moving and to choose the really good choices, and you're an example for all of us. It's I'm asking these questions so that I can understand, where things are coming from and how they're being built, and so I can promote it.
Nice.
Doing the research.
Thank you.
Well, one of the things that's fun working with Chris Kilfoyle is he's very fussy about what equipment he uses and how it's sourced. And when I have major questions about solar legislation, he's the guy I go to too. So that it's really interesting.
He's a living encyclopedia.
Yeah. And I have not talked to him about the Form Energy batteries yet. And he may shoot that down altogether, but we'll see.
Well, I'm intrigued because there's such a rush to go out and buy more cars to replace the gasoline cars. But between computers and cars and batteries overall, it's looking pretty grim for the environment in some ways. I'm worried about that.
There's more and more research into alternatives to lithium ion batteries because of the environmental hazards from mining. And there's also a lot of research into recycling them. And some of the latest reports I saw mentioned that recycling is actually more reliable than virgin batteries at this point, or they think it will be very soon. So there is some hope on keeping them out of landfills, and also cutting back on mining if they can recycle what's already in use.
The car piling up, and metal, recycled metal, it just sucks. It's terrible, terrible stuff. Doesn't have the durability, doesn't last as long, it rusts more easily. And there's a lot going on that we think is wonderful, but really needs to be examined pre-putting it out there. So I'm just very interested in all the work you guys are doing, and I thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Neat.
I'd also add to Pamela that some of the research that's being done in terms of electric vehicle battery chemistries, they're looking even at sodium as a metal. It's not as energy dense as lithium, but it's pretty close to it on the periodic table. And they think they can actually make it work. In terms of storage batteries that BEAT might eventually use, there's also technology for zinc air batteries, which is another very common metal that is available on the market now. And so there's a lot of possibilities that we can have going forward. And then finally, I'll say about lithium, there's a number of different sources that are available for lithium. And there's this big, almost like a gold rush to grab as much of it as people can right now. So lots of inappropriate sites are being exploited and developers want to go in and dig up all the lithium that there is, regardless of whether there's indigenous communities that are using that land, like is the case in Thatcher Pass, Utah, is a very contested proposed mine. But then on the other hand, you have places like the Salton Sea in California, which is pretty much a Superfund site. And right now, because it's got such horrible toxins in it, but it's also really rich in lithium.
Oh.
And there's efforts afoot to extract lithium from that, and it's a huge deposit. And if they do that, they could take a portion of the proceeds that they get from that and actually do environmental remediation there and actually help to clean up that mess. So in the situation like that, if it's done right, actually acquiring lithium could be a good thing in combination with really good network of recycling and sort of manufacturing standards that make EV batteries recyclable, so that they can actually do that. So people are working on that. So it's actually, there's some reason to hope, and that's some of the things I get to see because I'm doing all that research every week, looking for news to dump in the website and the weekly news check-in. And so that gives me hope that it's actually good stuff happening.
Is anybody considering the exterior of the cars, making them a little sturdier and more long-lasting so they're not?
I think for the most part, they're going the other direction, which is worrisome.
Okay. I just wondered if there was any information about somebody thinking that through, that's all. So I really appreciate the research that you guys are doing. Thank you.
Neat. Well, thank you all for coming. It's just after 7.
Oh.
Very much appreciate your time, and have a great holiday and new year. See you next year.
Okay, you too.
Thank you. Thank you.
Everybody.
See you next
Thank you,
year.
everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks.
Happy New Year.
Happy
Happy New
New Year.